Industries project as part of the 50th anniversary. I'm Carol Pohl from the Social Science Department. The filmmaker is Mark Gaynor, and it's being filmed on February 22nd, 1995, in the office of Helen Xenakis, A606. And Helen, if you could introduce, tell us a little about yourself.
Certainly. Thank you, Carol. My name is Helen Xenakis, and I am the internship coordinator here at FIT. I have been with FIT since 1988 and actually began as an adjunct in the fashion buying and merchandising area. After 25 years in retail merchandising, most of that time as a buyer, I came here and it was a natural transition into the FBM department. In 1990, I had the opportunity to interview for and then receive the position of college-wide internship coordinator here at the college. So I've been in this position now going into the 5th year. We've seen great changes in the internship office from the time of its beginning, which was essentially the early 80s. We have some documentation back to about 82 and 83. The internship office actually began because of the need in the advertising and communications area for work experience for students. So it was not, in truth, originally a college-wide internship program, but instead really was for the benefit of those students in advertising and communications. At that time, we were servicing 50 or 60 students a year, and it began to evolve to include more and more of the business and technology students. Began to include students in the upper division options, which included marketing communications and international trade and cosmetics, fragrance, and toiletries, and home furnishing.
You say options. Could you explain why it's called options?
In business and technology, in the upper division, the students that are going from the lower division FBM or AdCom programs that would like to go for a bachelor's degree will receive a marketing degree. However, it will be a specialization in a particular option within marketing. And that specialization ranges from home furnishings to international trade, marketing communications, merchandising, management, and there are a few others also. So we began to see the need for students to gain experience in industry before actually going out there and working. Obviously, internships served that need. Truly, an internship is an opportunity for students to gain experience and exposure to the field in which they hope to have a career without making the commitment. Now, that's really a wonderful option for a student to be able to work in an area but not commit to that company or that area. It's kind of a test run, if you would. But it also serves the industry, because an industry employer can preview a potential employee for a period of time. Now, isn't that wonderful? To be able to have someone on your premises that you yourself have not made a commitment to, but that you can begin to train and preview. Not only in that student's abilities, but whether or not that student gets along well with coworkers, whether or not that student shows up on time or shows up at all. Do they have the courtesy of calling when they're going to be late or not going to be able to come to work that day? Those are the things that employers are looking for, and we are able to provide that. We're very proud of the fact that the internship office today, in the beginning of 1995, is servicing about 500 students annually. So you can see the tremendous growth from the beginning of that program. Those 500 students are essentially coming from the business and technology area. However, many of them now are coming from art and design. We are now servicing those students doing internships in the fashion design area as well as menswear. All of the other areas and departments in the art and design division, if they have an internship, they have either the chairperson or a designee within that department handling it with support from us. We're providing the forms and the procedures and some of the contacts. Those departments that do not have an internship are looking at internship more and more. Interior design, for instance, is beginning to get on board, as is the fine arts area. And eventually, I see my title as college-wide internship coordinator not being a misnomer, but in truth being exactly what we will be doing in this office, and that will be servicing the needs of all students throughout FIT.
And where are some of the places they are interning?
Well, that's exciting too. In order to service 500 students plus a year, we have to give these students some options. So part of our job is to develop sponsors. We currently have a sponsor base of over 900 companies. Now, we always have more companies than we will ever have students because we want our students to have a choice. And they can do that when they have companies to choose from. Representative of the companies that we have are small, medium, and large-sized companies, and all of the heavy hitters in the industry. If we take students in the fashion area or merchandising or pattern making or fashion design, they're going to companies that are as well known as Donna Karan and Ralph Lauren and Calvin Klein, but they're also going to companies that are involved in product development, private label development, and product development. Companies like Made in America, companies like Kellwood, that were perhaps not as well known from a consumer standpoint, but are very well known within the industry. We service the advertising and communication students, and they're going to all major agencies, major magazines, all of the networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, even MTV is part of our roster of companies. We see our role here in the internship office as really being threefold. One is certainly servicing the students, and that's our number one priority. But in order to service the students properly, we have to have the sponsors. So we are out there developing sponsors on a regular basis. That's part of what we do here. We're out in industry, not only going to the companies that are established, but to the new companies that are opening up all of the time. Our industry is very famous for that, with new startup companies that are beginning in a loft down in Soho, a new designer or a new agency, a new PR firm. So we're out there finding them and meeting with them and bringing them on board if it's appropriate. And then the third is the interaction with administration, faculty, and staff here at FIT. We draw many of our sponsors from the networking we do with the faculty.
What do you mean by that?
Going to faculty members in any of the areas, and again, I keep repeating this, but it includes the production areas and pattern making and advertising and FBM, going to them and saying, I understand that your background is with Macy's. We are looking to develop some more buying line internships. Do you have contact with people still in industry? Oh, sure I do. My best friend is now the VP at whatever. Great. May I use your name? I'd like to make that contact. It's so much easier for us when we can pick up the phone and through a cold call say, oh, and by the way, your friend here at FIT, Carol Pohl, told me to give you a call. That makes our job easier. That's networking, and that's part of the technique that we're always teaching students in class. And that's something I also want to tell you about. Our program does not provide credit for working. That's not what we do here. We are not the placement office. Internships, traditionally, are experiences that are credit-bearing. There is an academic component. What we have here is a two-part program. Students receive credit for not only working, but for attending class. They attend this class during the semester in which they are doing their internship. And students have the option of doing an internship in the spring, in the summer, or in the fall, either in lower division or in upper division. The students apply to our program and meet with a counselor that handles their industry area. During this interview, the counselor is looking for a grade point average of at least a 2.5, because if students are less than a 2.5, the time that it takes on an internship could prove to be a disadvantage, could take away from their academic studies. We look for that. We also also look for a student who is at the appropriate semester, which would mean in lower division they should be in their third or fourth semester, or the summer between. And in upper division, they should be in their seventh or eighth semester, or the summer between. That, and then coupled with the right attitude. Remember, these students are representatives of FIT. They are the ambassadors of FIT out in industry. So if you are the product manager at Donna Karen, and the student is with you, as far as you're concerned, that student represents FIT. So we want to make sure that that student understands what is expected of them out in industry. And we work with the students on that. Students have an opportunity to then look at our sponsor books, which contain letters on company letterhead, which detail what an internship would be like if a student chose to do that internship in that company. Students look at these books. They go out on 2 interviews. Interviewing experience is very important. And they have the right of refusal, as does the company. Hopefully they're going to be offered both internships. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes the match is not there. And if they need to go on more than 2, they certainly will go on more than 2. Once they have decided on the internship and the company agrees, the student will begin that internship at the beginning of the appropriate semester. But they are applying to us the semester before they plan to do the internship. So they're applying in the fall for the spring, and they're applying in the spring for the summer and the following fall. And we have deadline dates for them. The students that go through our program will then receive anywhere from 2 to 4 credits depending on the major. Fashion design receives 2 credits. Most of the B&T areas, business and technology areas, receive 4 credits. And it applies as either a related area elective or a major area elective, depending on, again, the department and that particular major area.
What percentage go on to stay in the job?
Good question, Carol. I'm really glad that you asked that. That is something we're particularly proud of. We are looking at a conversion rate of 40% and more. Now, the key is of eligible students. What does that mean? Students that are in the lower division doing an internship are very often not eligible to stay on for full-time employment because they are going to upper division. Or they have decided that they're going to be leaving FIT and going somewhere else for their bachelor's degree. So their education is continuing. Some students that are going for a bachelor's degree in upper division have decided to go on for graduate work. They are, again, not eligible. Students that have decided to leave the New York area and perhaps go home or try their luck on the West Coast or in the South, again, may simply not be eligible because of location. But those students that are eligible are looking at a 40+% conversion rate. Now that speaks very highly of our students, but it also speaks to the employer and what we said earlier about the ability to preview a potential employee. To have them with you for 12 weeks to see how they work. And then that commitment to offer them a position isn't quite as frightening as it is when you've only interviewed them 2 or 3 times. And let's be candid, everyone's very on their best behavior when they interview. But when you have someone working with you for a period of time, some of those slips you begin to see.
Could you talk a little about the background of the students? You mentioned some students go back to their home country. Do you see a diverse, are these mostly females? Are they different cultural backgrounds in terms of the...
Well, the internship program is probably representative of the college. I believe we have an 85% female percentage here going to FIT or something like that, and that certainly is reflective in the number of students that do internships. We do have a proportionately high percentage of foreign students that would like to do internships for many reasons. First of all, they want exposure to American businesses. Because of their legal status, they are not able to take jobs. So an internship really serves them well. It gives them an opportunity to get out into industry without receiving compensation. The majority of our internships, an overwhelming percentage of our internships, are non-paid because they are credit-bearing. As a matter of fact, less than 10% of our internships are paid. And the decision as to whether or not they are paid is a corporate decision. It is certainly not our decision. We will never turn down a company that pays, but it is not what we look for. The first thing we're looking for is a meaningful work experience. So we do see a high percentage of foreign students utilizing the services of an internship. Absolutely.
By foreign students, you mean they come from another country, studying here and going to return there. And what countries do you see?
Well, FIT publishes every year a list of those countries that are representative of students that are here. And right now we have students from Korea as being the single highest percentage from any individual foreign country. We're looking at
returning to Korea.
Many of them are. Of course, students legally have the option of being in this country for a 1-year practical training. It's an F1 visa status, and certainly the technicalities of that are better known by Arnaldo Vidal down in the admissions office. But from what I understand, on an F1 status, you can stay here for 1 year in practical training, which simply means after the conclusion of your education, you can work in this country, receive payment for 1 full year, and then you would return to your country of origin. And I understand that we are looking at an over 11% of the full-time day student body is representative of students from foreign countries.
We're here to return to
Exactly. Very high percentage, and as I said, Korea is the country that has the highest percentage at this point of students.
And what about language problems in the placement?
That is a major problem for us. That is definitely a major problem, and it depends on the student's area as to whether or not it poses a problem. Many of our visiting students from foreign countries are very highly educated and come from families that are affluent. Students have done a great deal of traveling, and they're very worldly, and they come here speaking many languages, not just their home language. Many of the industry people will tell us that they do need students that have a better command of the language than some of our students do, and we are careful about that. And if that's one of the things that a sponsor is looking for, we're careful to make sure that the student that interviews with them does possess better language skills than someone else. Perhaps the student in the pattern making area, that might not be as much of a problem because their skill that they are working on is really technical, and the language may not be quite as big a factor as it would be in a communications area, for instance.
And what are some of the future directions you see
with internship? It's mind-boggling. First of all, certainly here at the college, we understand, and more students understand, that the best way to get a job is by having had some real experience in that field. Many of our students have a great deal of work experience, but it's not related to the industry in which they hope to eventually have a career. It's usually in the hospitality area, restaurants, bartending or waitressing, or it's in retail sales, which is extremely important and certainly develops the customer service aspect. But to have on your resume that you have worked in an advertising agency and then you're seeking a job in an advertising agency, well, there's some real experience there. So students are beginning to realize that. It's a tough world out there, and they want to be as competitive as other students from many of the other colleges. So I see this opening up to students throughout the college. My personal goal is that every student at FIT should have the opportunity to do an internship at some point in their academic studies here. That is my own personal goal, and I think that we're going toward that more and more.
We're winding down the interview. Is there anything you would like to add about the internship program or your experiences at FIT?
Well, experiences at FIT have been wonderfully positive. I feel fortunate because I spent 25 years in an industry that I loved. I got up every day and went to work and thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And once I left industry in 1986 And after 25 years, I made that conversion to education. I thought, I'll never be able to duplicate the career that I had and my love for it. But I have to tell you that I am fortunate in having a second career that I love as much. So I thank FIT for that opportunity. As far as internships, I think the sky's the limit. And I do believe that as students become more and more familiar with their opportunities and the opportunities here in the internship, through the internship program, that our numbers will expand. I am very proud to say that in the time that I have been here, we have gone from servicing 200 students a year in 1990 to over 500 in 1995. So we're very impressed with that and very happy to serve the students here at FIT.
Could I ask a little about your years in industry?
Sure.
What industries did you spend the most time in? How did you get into it?
Oh, well, I graduated from college in 1961, a few years ago, having spent all of my high school and college years working in retail, and was fortunate to have a mentor who was a buyer, who said to me, you really should become a buyer, and that's what I did. I left, when I left college, graduated in 1961, I went to a company called Kresge's, which was in Newark, New Jersey. Now, Kresge's was the department store branch of what then became Kmart. So I was real smart to be involved with Kmart at an early age, but at that time it was indeed not Kmart. The individual who owned the department stores also owned SS Kresge, which was the 5 and 10 operation. They sold their department store branch because of the Kmart, the beginning of Kmart, and I then left and went to Sears. And that was about 63 or so. Spent a number of years at Sears, and interesting, right here in the neighborhood, their buying offices were on 31st and 9th. So I'm not too far from where I actually started a few years ago. And I worked there in children's wear, 7 to 14 and preteen, started buying in that area, and then was involved with the beginning of the junior market. And Sears was one of the first companies in the early 60s to understand that there was going to be a junior sportswear market. Hard to believe there wasn't one in the early 60s. There was a Missy Sportswear, and there was children. And what they simply did is they went down from Missy and kind of went up from children's and created this junior sportswear market. There were very few manufacturers, and we started what was called Junior Bazaar at that time at Sears. I was with them for many years. They then moved over to Avenue of the Americas, and then eventually in the 70s moved everything to Chicago. At that point, I joined Bamberger's, which was in Jersey at that time, and was with Bamberger's until I left the industry in 1986. Now, my time with Bamberger's, I was again buying anywhere from sleepwear to juniors, and then went to the domestics area. Kind of had a career change within the company, and was buying. My last buying job was with table linens. So it was exciting because I was able to have many different types of merchandising areas to buy for. In 1986, I began to see the writing on the wall. Bamberger's was merging with Macy's. Macy's had actually owned Bamberger's since 1929, but not many people realize that. But a merger was going on, and things were happening in my life, and I thought, well, 25 years in this business is enough. I'm going to make a transition to education. And I did. In 1986, I went to Rockland County BOCES, which is the vocational high school, and developed their fashion merchandising program and taught that for a few years, which was fun. However, coming from the industry to go to high school students was a tough transition, especially when you came out of an industry you loved and you tried to convince high school students that they would love it too. That was a tough sell. So it was a natural move to come here to FIT. I knew Newt Godnick a little from the industry, and Newt suggested that I come here and interview, and began teaching here at FIT as an adjunct in 1988, and also did some work in a high school as a career counselor. So I was working part-time here and part-time there. And then in 1990, the position opened full-time as internship coordinator, and then I applied for it and was fortunate enough to receive it. So that's where I've been since 1990.
Okay, I want to thank you very much.
Oh, you're certainly welcome. It was my pleasure. I thank you both.
Is that it?
Okay, interesting. Where did you go to college?
Beaver College. And
what did you major in?
I was an economics major with a history minor, but I did take a number of education courses